Hello, welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast from WhoScored.com. It's time for another season preview, and this time it is the turn of Newcastle United. I'm joined by Alex, who is the host of the True Faith podcast. And Alex, I'm imagining there's a lot of faith going on with you with Newcastle at the moment. An incredible season last time round, and now you get to look forward to Champions League football this season.
Yeah, I can't wait. One of the most anticipated seasons in years, if not ever, for Newcastle fans at the minute. So yeah, just last season was almost perfect, and with added Champions League football this season, can we go one better and repeat it again, or even push the top two? Can't wait for it to start.
Yeah, you say it was almost perfect. Obviously, a cup final and getting Champions League football. I'm imagining if you'd been offered that at the start of last season, you would have absolutely taken it. But the progress that the club has made is absolutely astounding. Eddie Howe started the building blocks in his first half of the season, getting Newcastle up the league, getting them in the top half. But then to have done the job he's done and get them into the top four, and you've got Champions League football coming to St James's Park. How much are you in love with Eddie Howe?
I think he's the best manager in Europe, and I know that's probably a bold statement, but the word miracle for what he's done it was a miracle because the first season no one had ever survived from the position Newcastle were in, and they spent a little bit of money in January that season, but Chris Wood and Matt Targett wouldn't have been kind of top of most wish lists of football fans in England at the time. And then to go and kind of outperform teams with far greater resources in terms of squad ability and wage bill to finish above Liverpool and Chelsea and nearly above Manchester United. I mean, yeah, the man, I don't think there's anyone better for me.
The improvement of the players that were already there, Joe Linton, Almiron, even someone like Jacob Murphy, who'd never really set the world alight in Newcastle. He's not a starter week in, week out. But I think when you've got a player that comes in every now and again and performs to such a high level, that tells you everything about the manager, that he can just drop players in, and the training methods in the system. The players must be so well versed in it all. I think that says it all about what a good coach Eddie Howe is.
Very much so. And the reason he got the job was because he said he could improve a lot of the players who were there. And that's great to hear as a fan, because we knew we were underperforming at the time. We knew these players were better than what they were showing. The manager who was publicly saying these guys could give us a lot more. And Howe spent a little bit of money since he's taken the job.
Of course.
But in terms of how much would Joe Linton be worth now? Like you say, how much would Almiron be worth? Guys scoring 10 plus Premier League goals a season. Jacob Murphy's a really good example. I'm pleased you raised him, because everyone just said championship player. Player wasn't good enough for the Premier League. Had two kind of unsuccessful championship loans at Sheffield Wednesday and West Brom, and it was just like, they're not going to be able to get rid of this guy. And he fought his way into the team at several points last season, and he's a crucial part of the squad. So yeah, Howe's ability to not only integrate good players into the squad in terms of new signings, but improve the players that he inherited from the mess the previous manager left, just means the job he's done is even better.
Big signing last summer was Alexander Isak. Some sensational moments in the Premier League last season. It's going to be a joy to watch him on the Champions League stage as well. But someone like him having a full pre-season with Howe, he obviously didn't have that last time round because he was signed quite late. He's probably got a few more gears to go up. Guimaraes has been absolutely outstanding since he came to Newcastle, but I still think he's probably got other levels to his game, and that may well come out in the Champions League. Botman came in and was a really good signing. Trippier has been an unbelievable signing for Newcastle as well. So when you combine the good signings that Eddie Howe's made better, the players already there that he's made better, this summer you haven't really needed to do massive surgery. I think you probably still need a couple more in. But even being able to attract someone like Tonali, into the club 12 months ago, that's not happening, is it?
No, definitely not. He's not leaving for anywhere that isn't playing Champions League football. Played Champions League semi-final last season, still very young. And you touched on Isak there. The guy scored 10 Premier League goals last season, 13 appearances when played as a striker. He got a really bad injury when he first joined, which was a massive shame that we were denied of his services for so long, and it took him a couple of months to really get back up to full fitness. So if we can get kind of 30, 35 appearances out of him this season, there's another 10, 15 goals, I think, already on what we did last season. And, they haven't spent massively this summer compared to maybe what some people thought with the Champions League. But, if you add in Anthony Gordon in January, who looks like one of the best players in Europe right now, got the best young player at the European Under-21 Championships. He's come back into pre-season looking like that player. It's almost like a new signing. It's such a cliche, isn't it? But he hardly played after January. So I really do think the first team is in a much better place. Barnes as well coming in, clear upgrade on Alison Maximin. As much as we love them, Barnes is just goals and assists, and that's what we need. Whereas Maximin was ability and that could beat players for fun, but you didn't really get the pure output from him that maybe you need at this kind of level in terms of goals and assists. So I think they've done really good business this summer.
The defence really that needs a few more bodies in. I think you're probably looking at the full-back area and maybe a little bit short at centre-half as well in terms of quality if you're going to try and have a solid Champions League campaign.
Yeah, definitely. Newcastle joint best Premier League defence last season alongside Manchester City, which is a great achievement. But once one of those five in terms of Pope and then Trippier, Botman, Shaw and Burn drop off, there isn't much behind them to replace that, particularly at centre-back, really. Kieran Trippier played every minute of every game in the Premier League last season, all 38 games, which is remarkable. And there's a couple of fullbacks at the club that aren't in his class. I think, your world-class players in your starting 11, it's always going to be hard to replace them if they're not there. But the two centre-backs, Jamal Lascelles, who's been at the club 8 years now, and his club captain is a good leader and a good bloke, but he can't play the ball like we rely on centre-backs playing the ball like the two centre-backs do currently. And if they get injured, there's a huge drop-off in kind of quality on the ball, which is really important. So I'd love them to sign another decent centre-back. Even if they don't come into the first team, that would really bolster us. Because with Champions League this season, there's an extra 6 games guaranteed. You've got your 2 cup competitions as well. It's too much to ask both Shaw and Botman to kind of play 50, 60 games together.
I guess Byrne could move inside if you signed a left back as well. Matt Targett, you mentioned at the start, is still there, but it's not really taken off for him at Newcastle at all. It's almost like even some of the players you bought in that first window, and we've seen Chris Wood depart already, because the progress has been so accelerated. Players that you bought just over a year ago, Newcastle have already outgrown them, haven't they?
Definitely. Chris Wood and Matt Targett were probably signed to stay in the Premier League. That was what they came in for. Targett had a tough season last season because he picked up an injury early on, and then when he didn't get back into the team and then picked up another injury, he's never let Newcastle down. But we believe they are in a market for a left back. So it's clear Howe wants more in that position. You're spot on, though. Dan Byrne was signed again to keep Newcastle in the league as a centre back, but he's come through really nicely as a left back, as a very defensive left back, almost playing kind of 3 centre backs in that back four. Yeah. But I think Newcastle fans want to see a more attacking option there. That maybe isn't Matt Targett. Kieran Trippier, of course, plays left back for England more than he plays right back. So that is an option for him to move across if they do sign someone like Tino Livramento, who's been heavily linked and is a right back, but can also play left back. So a bit of versatility. That's what Howe likes about players. He likes players who can play more than one position. So Livramento would be a good signing for that.
I think you've hit a key point there in that you can't just buy 6-7 players. Newcastle, that's not the way to improve. You've got to improve gradually by getting quality, and you don't just rip up what was good last season, because ultimately that's what got you into the Champions League. So I think you're right. If they can bring in it's a more multifunctional players, Trippier can play maybe certain games at left back if they bring in someone like Livramento. Would you like to see Livramento in? Because before he got injured, he was looking like a really good prospect for Southampton.
Yeah, definitely. And he would add pace. And that's the one criticism of our back four is Botman has pace, but the other 3 definitely don't. And Nick Pope masks that a lot by being a sweeper keeper and taking risks and coming out to intercept the ball. But if they could sign someone like Livramento, he's rapid. He's absolutely rapid. And I think, he's young as well. And like you say, before his injury, he was one of the promising fullbacks in Europe. So Southampton don't want to let him go easily and cheap. They've got a big sell-on clause to Chelsea, which complicates things further. But it'd be a great signing for Newcastle.
Yeah, you've touched on Harvey Barnes as well and how he'll be an upgrade to Alan St-Maximin. Might not play every single game, but I think, you're right about the productivity. And I think in certain games, I'm probably thinking more about the Premier League here as well. St-Maximin, because of the way he is, doesn't always deliver the ball. Well, in fact, he barely ever delivers the ball into the box quickly for strikers. Harvey Barnes, I think he'll suit Callum Wilson more in the games that Callum Wilson plays, because Barnes is just so direct and so astute at getting the ball into the box and making those driving runs across defenders. So I think Barnes and Wilson potentially, they may not play in the European games. You may have a different kind of team set up in the European games, but certainly in the Premier League, I actually think Barnes will be very good for Wilson.
I totally agree with you. I think ASM was hugely popular with his teammates, but he would kind of want to beat a player 4 times before
nightmare for a striker.
Yeah, knocking the ball in the boxes. Newcastle had that under Ginola and Alan Shearer, and Ginola was a fan favourite before Shearer came in, and then Shearer came in and was just like, David, please just cross the ball. I need to know where to run, front post, back post. And you saw that with ASM. And I think Isak as well. Isak's a big player for kind of finding pockets of space, getting, his movement, getting in front of defenders. And I think the early balls that Barnes plays kind of without taking a touch, you're spot on. That'll be kind of meat and drink to our 2 strikers who just want quick ball in the box. And the fact that Barnes is a goal threat as well should also create extra space for the strikers as well. So I think it's a really good sign for that reason.
Yeah, another bonus, I guess, is academy players coming through as well. Elliot Anderson's looked very good in pre-season. Is it Miley as well, the other player that's coming through? But Elliot Anderson's really impressed me. I'm a Villa fan, so I watched the Newcastle Villa game. He looks like he bulked up to me, Anderson. He looks like a quite physical presence actually in the midfield, and it would be a real bonus if you could start to bring players through as well to supplement the squad. But he looks good, Elliot Anderson, and Howe's kind of hinted that he may well start the season in the 11.
He's been the best player in pre-season. Again, he was very good last pre-season. Everyone thought this kid, get him in the championship, get him 40 championship games in a promotion battle. That's what he needs. And Howe kind of shocked everyone by keeping him around the group, keeping him training with the first team, learning the system, learning the press. And like you've alluded to correctly, going on, a deluxe bulk up diet and weight regime.
I need to get myself on it. I need to find out what he's doing.
He's absolutely ripped, and that you really good point to kind of raise that Villa game where the strength to hold off a couple of players for his goal was incredible. And yeah, if you can have an attacking player who likes to go past a man like he does, that's great. But if they're physical as well and can really compete use their physicality to compete, that's again bread and butter for Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe loves physical players. He wants to bully opponents. He wants to turn balls over high up the pitch, and a player like Elliot Anderson just seems built for that right now. So really excited to see what he can do. And Lewis Miley as well, 17 years old, so young, it just looks so comfortable on the ball in tight areas. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself with young players who haven't played lots of first-team football because you don't know how they'll develop. But if he can develop at the rate we think he's going to, I think he'll get a lot of Premier League minutes this season, Miley. Maybe not at the start of the season, but as the season goes on, it could be kind of 2, first names on the team sheet almost, being local lads. And if you're a club like Newcastle who have serious issues with financial fair play and trying to develop their squad, naturally through that, because they're very bad at selling players, because traditionally their players have been very bad. No one wants to buy them. Academy graduates are the way around that, so it's absolutely crucial.
Yeah, what an environment to come into as well. Local lads coming into this team. Just talk to me a little bit about the atmosphere at St James's Park and just how it's going to be, especially on those Champions League nights. I can't even imagine how you must feel. I remember Newcastle being in the Champions League when I was younger, and I was probably first starting to watch football, and Newcastle had a couple of Champions League campaigns. But after so long, and as well, you have had a miserable time before this takeover. I've been a victim of Bruce Bull myself at times, and the excuses of blaming everyone else, but himself. So you've been through some misery. To now come through that and to have the elation that you're about to have in those Champions League nights, just explain to people who aren't Newcastle fans what that atmosphere will be like.
It'll be incredible. I think it won't just be a stadium thing; it'll be a city thing. I'm really looking forward to kind of half days in the build up to a Champions League Champions League fixture. I think that when they developed that stadium back in the early 2000s, it was developed with Champions League football in mind. It was developed to host those kind of occasions, and it'll just be extraordinary. And I think one of the good things about Newcastle under Eddie Howe is that it doesn't matter who they're playing. They don't take a step back, whether it's Manchester City, whether it's Leeds United at home. The approach is always the same: front foot, high press. We're going to try and take the ball off you. We're going to try and pressure you out of play. We're going to leave gaps at the back. We're going to leave space for you to run into. We don't care. And seeing how Europe's elite deal with that and how we cope with them is just incredibly exciting. And, I just can't wait for those kind of September through to December nights. At least 3, home European fixtures just should be absolutely incredible atmosphere-wise.
I mean, to be honest, I'm looking forward to that mini Amazon series that's coming out, because I'm looking forward to seeing the inner workings and how operates in the dressing room. I've seen a few clips in the trailer of what it's going to be like, and I know a few players that have played under Eddie Howe as well, albeit not at Newcastle, but they all rave about him. You know, he'll savour those Champions League nights as well, because I think he's always had that inner belief in himself as a manager, and probably believed that he's destined for these nights. In some ways, it's probably taken longer for him to get to the Champions League than he thought it would. But the fact he's got Newcastle there already deserves a huge amount of credit. What are you looking for this season? If you had to predict where Newcastle are going to finish, how much is the Champions League going to factor in your prediction? Because it's a great thing to have, but it will be a little bit of a distraction to the league for them, I imagine.
I think what I'm hopeful of is, so there are at least 6 Champions League games. Newcastle played 8 cup fixtures last season domestically. So there's kind of a similar amount of games there. I think a lot of people expect us to not do so well in the domestic competitions as a result. I think if Newcastle could improve on their points total, that would be massive. You just alluded to Eddie Howe there in his kind of the high standards to which he holds himself and his players and his club. He won't be looking at 71 points in 4th place as some sort of pinnacle. No. This is just another step on the journey. I think if Newcastle could touch 80 points this season, that would be a big improvement. You know, if you can get to March, April, still in touch with the leaders. I'm not saying Newcastle go in the league. I'm not even saying they put a proper title challenge, but they were second on Boxing Day last season. So they weren't a million miles away. So I think if they can add more goals, because they got 68 goals last season, which was a little bit light compared to a lot of the clubs at the top end of the league, and their excellent defence offset that. But if they can get a few more goals this season, push on towards 80, 90 goals and get to 80 points, I think they'll be good enough for 3rd this season. And I think Howe would be happy with that, because it's progress and it's all about improvement and moving forward. And then if you finish on 80 points this season, then you can look to the season after and look to improve again. And, you know, the owners of the club are very vocal. They want to win the Premier League. They want to win the Champions League. Well, you can't do that by moving backwards. So I don't really buy the idea that Newcastle would be lucky to get top 6 because they've got Champions League. I think it's full steam ahead.
I've got to be honest, the coefficients, the way they're going to be done, it probably means that the top 5 will get into the Champions League next season. And I look at the squads so far, the way they're set up, Newcastle are comfortably in the top 5 best sides in the Premier League at the moment. Chelsea and Tottenham have still got work to do. Obviously, they fell away a little bit last season. Liverpool are in serious transition. Brighton, will they be as good again? I'm not sure, but they usually recover from losing players. But they've got to manage the load of Thursday, Sunday. The top 4 that finished top 4 last season, they're still the best 4 teams in the Premier League for me at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, I look at Manchester United in particular. I thought Man U were really lucky to get 3rd last season. We took 4 points off them and really battered them at our place. Didn't really have any answers, and we should have won at their place as well. You know, they spent a lot of money, but there seems to be a lot of turmoil. So I think there is maybe a spot in the top 4, but I don't think it'll be Newcastle giving up theirs. I think, like you say, like Chelsea has got too much to do. They're too far away. For even if Pochettino gets them 5th or 6th, that's an unbelievable season for them.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Villa obviously are one to watch as Newcastle fans, because, you know, some really, really good signings again. Emery, who was the first choice of our owners when they took over. I'm pleased he passed on the job, because we wouldn't have Howe, but he's obviously done unbelievable work at Aston Villa. Aston Villa, the only team really last season to deservedly beat Newcastle, really, when they had a real off day. Newcastle, that is, had a real off day at Villa Park. So I think Villa will be in contention as well for at least a top 5 spot. So that'll keep it interesting too.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. Absolutely here for that all day. Villa and Newcastle, I find both quite refreshing, actually, that they're back up towards the upper echelons of the Premier League. Because again, when I was a kid, Newcastle were probably finishing 2nd and Villa were finishing 4th, 5th, 6th. You know, so that they were up there. It's great to see those traditional clubs back up and trying to mix it with the big boys. So just to finish, you have to pick one player for Newcastle this season to name as a key man. Who would it be?
It's got to be Bruno Guimaraes. You know, he missed 6 games last season for Newcastle, and Newcastle won none of them. That's how important he is to Newcastle. I mean, if he'd played every game last season, we could have been, you know, pushing for the title. That's just how important he is. I'm not sure, you know, fans of other clubs just know how important he is to everything Newcastle do defensively, offensively. He's you know, I heard, and it makes a lot of sense, that when Newcastle picked him up for about £33 million, there's an inquest at, you know, scouting departments at top English clubs saying, you know, we're forking out £70 to £100 million for premium footballers here, and they've got him for 33 million. He's a Brazilian international. It wasn't like he's a secret. The bloke is world class. There's a little bit of contract stuff going on with him at the minute. The club wanted to sign a new deal, and he wants to sign a new deal, but they're sorting out the money. I think they might announce that before that first fixture against Aston Villa, just to give everyone a lift. And if the guy is world class, it wouldn't surprise me, even if Newcastle continue to improve, for him to end up at a Real Madrid or someone like that, because he's that good. Do
you think? Because I've always thought Newcastle's accelerated progress means that actually the big boys can't just come and take him. If let's say Newcastle had finished 6th, 7th last season, which would have been a really, really good season, and maybe you would have taken that at the start of the season, and that would have been continued progress from the year before. I always thought maybe teams would be able to come and take players from Newcastle. I actually think now that I don't think anyone can take players from Newcastle.
I don't think so either. I do think that the club have to sell players due to financial fair play. They are stuck with a load of long commercial deals from before the takeover. So Man United just signed a £90 million a year deal with Adidas over 10 years, so 900 million. Our deal's £4 million a year. So there's an £86 million difference. So in terms of being able to sign players, I think there's an acceptance within the club. Yeah, you only sell who you want, and you only sell at a silly price. But if someone came in with 120 million for Bruno, which may sound silly to some people listening if they don't watch him play that much, you can spend. It's like Villa and Jack Grealish. Villa don't have the FFP problems because of that transfer. That's kind of set you up over the next few years of massive spending. Newcastle sold one player in the past kind of 4 seasons for money, and it's Chris Wood, who was here 6 months, and they sold him for half as much as they bought him for. So that, sadly, it's the modern way of football. It's not very exciting to talk about, but they are going to have to play a trade on a big level. But if he's here for the next 10 years, that'll do fine as well.
The good news for you is that Real Madrid are pretty well stocked in central midfield at the moment, so I don't see them coming in for him anytime soon. But you're right, all the big clubs, even Manchester United themselves, they're having to look at financial fair play. City as well. If you can offload players and get money back into the football club, it does help. We've been able to bring top level players in, but I think Newcastle are doing everything right at the moment with the way they're building. I'd expect them to make a couple of signings as well before the season starts. So I wish you all the very best for the start of the season, except for game 1. I hope game 1 goes absolutely horrendously for you. But it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks ever so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.